Hello, Shariah and Susan and anyone else who will join for the recording and or the live session. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you all here again. And we have some really exciting projects this week, which are awesome because they're easy and there's pretty much no pressure with these week 2 little projects and assignments. So I know some people are stressing, like, is this part of my final project? Is this something related to my fictitious business? And I'm like, you know what? The sky is the limit as far as what you can do with this week's assignments. The purpose here is really to be something that you can, like, practice with, basically. This is a chance for you to kind of familiarize yourself with the Photoshop software, experiment with a few things if you so desire, but there's really no pressure here, and that's the most important point. This is all about having fun and experimenting with the program a little bit. So before we begin, I thought I'd just dive into talking about your discussion and your assignment and the design brief a little bit. And but I want to check in with you guys. Do you have any specific questions, concerns, issues, want one-on-one help with something? You know, this is your time. So if there is something that you want, make use of me. All righty. So you guys are doing good. Fantastic. So what we're going to do is just talk about, I think we kind of covered a little bit of this actually last, I just saw a question pop up in the chat. Let me see. The best way to resize after starting. So are you, that's Shariah, that's a great question. Are you referring specifically to how to resize the whole document or how to resize just a single object in the document? Okay, resize the whole document. So an important note about resizing the whole document is that you can always take a document and shrink it down and make it smaller, but you should never take a small document and make it larger than what it's saved as. Because if you do take a small document and make it bigger, it's going to become blurry and pixelated, and that's no good. So Susan is asking, every time I thought I was creating, it didn't actually show. Okay, I'd love to, if you wanted to later share your screen and show me what issue that is, I'd be happy to help you. I'm not quite sure what you were having trouble with there, but I'd be totally happy to help you. So what we're going to do is actually, let's start by making a new document. So I'm going to go to File, New, File, New, and we're going to make a document that is, let's make something easy, 8 inches by 10 inches, 72 resolution. Okay, so now I'm going to add 3 different layers. I'll create a new layer by clicking on the new layer icon in this panel here, which is the layers panel. And if for some reason you don't see the layers panel, you can go up to Window and then scroll down to Layers and make sure there's a check mark next to it. Another way that you can kind of reset your program, so it's kind of with all of the defaults and everything, you can go to Window, and then you can go to Workspace, and then click Reset Essentials, and that will reset it so that you have your, your tool panel on the left side and your layers on the right side, and a few other things. But mainly, honestly, for the whole course of this class, all you really need to know is the layer panel and the tool panel. okay? So I just made a new layer, and now I'm gonna go over here to my paint bucket tool. And I'm gonna select a, oh, and by the way, your paint bucket tool might be hidden behind the gradient tool because they're roommates together. And you know, if you see the square that's dark on one side, light on the other side, you just click on it and then you click on paint bucket tool. Now you can go down here to the foreground color swatch, click on it, choose any old color you want, click OK, and then click on this document. And there we have it. We have changed the background color. So that's one layer. Now I'm going to make a new layer. And this time I'm going to experiment with the, how about let's use the custom shape tool. And I'll go up to the custom shape library here and I'll find an interesting shape. How about this shape here? And then I'm going to check the 3 options which are available at the top of the screen: shape, path, and pixels. And I'm going to select shape because shape will enable me to create a vector object that can be easily resized. And obviously if I had it this dark red color and I draw it, it's going to be dark red on a dark red background, so we're not going to see anything. So I'm going to click on fill and I'll click on my color picker, which is this rainbow box right here. And I'll select something slightly different. You know what might be kind of cool is a really light blue color for contrast. Okay, now I'm going to hold down the shift button, click and drag, and if I hold down the shift button, it maintains the height and width proportions. Watch what happens if I don't hold down the shift button. See how it gets skewed and stretched like this? So holding down the shift button retains the height to width proportions. There we go. Now I'm going to enter return. Okay, and that is my second layer. And now I'll choose something different. I think I'll choose a, actually if I change the color here now, I'm going to be changing the color on this blue layer. So I need to make a new layer first. Then I can change my foreground color to something else. A little bit of a lighter muted color there. And this time I will choose a, the polygon tool is really fun because it allows you to make stars and stuff. So I'm going to click on the polygon tool. And then I'm going to click on this little gear icon here up at the top of the screen. And what do we do? We'll indent sides this time by 80%. And I like having a starburst, so I'm going to kind of stick with maybe 50 sides on my star. And then I'm going to click and drag. And now I'm going to hit enter return. And there we have our 3 layers, and it's kind of trippy, isn't it? Something that might be really cool to use in this instance, and this is a little bit more of an advanced tool, so don't freak out if you're like, I have no idea what you're doing, Carly. But you can clip one layer inside of another layer by holding down the Option button if you're on a Mac, and the Alt button if you're on a PC, hovering over the line between the 2 layers. So in this case, I want to clip polygon 1 inside of shape 1. So basically I'm making a flower that has this interesting stripe pattern on it. And so what I'll do is hold down the Alt or Option button and click on the line, and see now I've clipped that starburst inside of the shape. And if I wanted to get really fancy, I could just make a new layer now. And I'll choose a different color. I could use a little ellipse tool. Holding down the shift button. And obviously I placed that off center, so I'm going to need to hit the letter V and move it into place. All right, now I have this fun sort of flower with crazy stripes on it. So now we had a wonderful question from Shariah about resizing a document. So if I go up to image size, this is the best way to resize it. So right now I have a document that's 576 pixels by 720 pixels. If I look at that in inches, basically I have a document that's 8 inches by 10 inches, 72 dpi. So I can always shrink this document down and it will be fine. But I can't make the document bigger. Photoshop will allow me to make the document bigger, but when I go to print it out, when I send it to someone to view, or when I use it for some purpose, it's gonna look really bad. So something that you also might wanna keep in mind is if you intend to resize a document, you want to always save and back up the large version of that document first so that you can always return to the largest, highest resolution version available. Shirai is asking, so there's no way to do it manually from the corner? No, it's all, because if you were to resize it from the corner, there's the risk of, making one side squished and skewed, and it's much better to go to image size. So anyway, I'm going to show you the process for saving and backing up your file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. Did I accidentally close it? Cancel. File, Save As. There we go. I pressed the wrong button. And I'm going to make this new folder, SNHU demo. And I'll call this, I'm sure there was some naming convention that was listed in the assignment that you were encouraged to use, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. So let's just call this week 2 discussion _ your name. And I'll call this large version. And I'll hit save. And now let's resize it and save the small version. So I'm going to go to image size. Go back to inches. And this time I'll change it to you want to make sure the little lock is on so that you maintain the height to width proportions. I'll call this 5. So it's now 5 by 6. And now I'll go File, Save As, and I'll save this version as small. Yay. And now let's say you're working for a client or you're just having a heck of a time getting your large Photoshop document uploaded to the classroom. You want to save the JPEG. The JPEG is the universal image file format that's used anytime you want to upload a picture to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Tumblr, or email it to a friend or put it in your portfolio. So it's probably the most important file type other than the native file type, which is Photoshop, that you'll want to know. So to save a JPEG, you'll go to File, Export, Save for Web, File, Export, Save for Web. GIF, save. Ta-da! Okay, now I'm gonna close this out. And I'm gonna reopen the large version. So I can demonstrate how to do the assignment this week, which is about using design elements. And we actually already have some design elements in here. We have line. What are they? Let's pull up our journal. That's what I should have called it. It's the journal that's due this week. So you're going to go ahead and take a look at this article, which goes over the basic elements of design. And they are indeed very basic. So you have line, you have color, shape, space, texture, typography, size, dominance, emphasis, balance, harmony. I'd also like to add contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Those are the big four that you use a lot in design. Contrast is the idea that you make the focal point significantly lighter or darker than the background so that your eye goes to it. So contrast is really important. Repetition is you always want to repeat the same things. So for instance, in this little infographic here, the color of this kind of desaturated red with this desaturated green is a repetition. Using the same color scheme creates harmony. Alignment, and you can see alignment is used in this little infographic here, keeping everything in a grid, everything aligned, nothing's just randomly placed. And proximity, placing important things close together. So for instance, proximity is all of the information on lines is grouped together, all the information on color is grouped together, all the information on shape is grouped together, etc. So contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity are the big four of graphic design. So so we already have line, certainly we already have color, and we have shape. And we've used space and the idea of negative space. Texture is really fun. So let's add a little bit of texture to our design. So you can go, actually, let me show you where you can go. If you go on Google, you can do a search for something like, I'll do glitter texture. And you can go to images. And you, of course, I think I talked about this last time. You don't want to just choose whatever picture you feel like, because some of these are copyright protected, right? So you're going to go to Tools, and you're going to go to Usage Rights, and click Labeled for Reuse Modification. Labeled for Reuse Modification. And then you have all of these free images that you can use. I like to find the ones that you are on websites that you don't have to log in to look at them. Wikimedia Commons is usually my hero. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this image. And what you want to do is, before you download the image, you want to view it as large as possible, so that you are downloading the largest version possible. And now I'm going to hold down the control button, click on this image, and click Save Image As. So hold down the control button, click on the image, and click Save Image As. And I'll just save this to my little SNHU folder here. And I'll call this glitter.jpg. Okay, now I'm going to use that glitter as a texture on my document. So I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, browse to the glitter file, and then hit Place. Now, if we look up at the top of the screen, we can see our width is at 14.81% and our height is at 14.81%. So we can continue to increase the size of this picture as much as we want up to 100%. Once we go past 100%, it's going to become blurry and pixelated. Something important is for those of you who are in Photoshop 2019 and above, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is click on these corners and resize, and it's super easy. Of course, resize from the corners, don't resize from the top and bottom. For those of you who are on earlier versions of Photoshop, you'll want to always hold down the Shift button as you click and drag from the corners. In order to maintain the height and width proportions, you need the width to always be 29.09 and the height to always be 29.09. Basically, those numbers need to always be exactly the same. If it ends up being 32 by 25, it's going to look weird, okay? Because it'll look stretched and it'll look unprofessional and bad. So after you've resized it, you'll hit enter or return. And now we can use what's called blending modes to get this texture to show up while our design shows up underneath. Now, right now, our texture is a colored texture. So that color is going to interact with the colors underneath, which could be good or could be bad. Just a little heads up, usually when working with textures professionally in Photoshop, designers desaturate the texture first, meaning they make it black and white first before applying the blending modes. And you can easily do that by going up to Image at the top of the screen, Adjustments, and you can either hit hue saturation and draw the saturation all the way down, or rasterize the layer and then hit Shift-Command-U to desaturate it. For now, I'm going to leave it in color just so you can see how the color interacts with the layers underneath. Now, I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to this is kind of the default texture blending mode, which is overlay, okay? And so that looks pretty cool, right? So what overlay does is it allows the darks, the darker midtones, the medium midtones, and the light midtones to show up in the midtones of the picture, resulting in a sort of textural effect. Soft light will have a slightly gentler effect. It won't be quite as so prominent. Oh, and in addition to allowing those textures to show up, if there's color, the color is going to be increased in saturation. Now, soft light, like I said, is a little bit more gentle, and you're not going to get that increase in saturation. Hard light is going to really make sure that the color shows through. So we had kind of a bluish thing, and that color is going to really, really show through. And if you have a black and white texture, the highlights of that texture are going to show in the highlights of the image as well as in the shadows. Okay, so you'll see all the texture in the highlights and in the shadows. Whereas in overlay, the texture will just show up in the midtones. Now, here's vivid light, which is like hard light and overlay mixed together, right? You get the saturation, you get the texture. Here's linear light, pin light, and hard mix. So these are kind of what's called the texture blending modes. These ones all in here. There's blending modes that have to do with exposure and color, which are up here, and which I really wouldn't recommend for texturizing an image. These have other purposes that we'll have to talk about later. And these usually involve lightening a picture, and they can be kind of good. But also these have specific purposes. Often I use a lot of these in beauty retouching. But I would say that this section here is the go-to for good texturizing. And then all of these guys down here are really going to alter the color of your design. And I also wouldn't really recommend them for texture. Okay, I would say these are your go-to. So I kind of like hard light what's happening there. Now, something else that you can do is opt to just put the texture in the background. So I'm going to click and drag on this layer and see now just the texture is on the background, and it kind of looks like this flower is on a kind of watery, glittery background, which is kind of cool. We can also clip the ellipse, that's this thing, into my flower shape along with that starburst I made. And then I can clip the glitter on top of that. So see, now the texture is just showing up in the flower. So that's an option too. I kind of like it in the background. I think that's what I'm feeling. Okay, so we've added texture. Let's go ahead and take a look at, so it's then add 4 simple design elements. Okay, so we added texture, that's one. Typography. So typography is really easy. Click on a new layer. Now I have kind of a darkish background, so I'm gonna wanna use white text. And the text tool I'm gonna use, of course, we always make a new layer first, right? I'm gonna use the text tool here, which is the T in your tool panel. And then I'm gonna go up to the top of the screen, and I wanna choose a font that's gonna really stand out. I kind of have a complicated background. And so a super elegant font is probably not gonna be a good call. Unless I could put the font like in the middle of this flower shape. That actually might be cool. I think that's what I'll do, because this background's way too complicated for something. So I'm gonna use an elegant font after all. Avenir condensed. That looks like my jam. Okay, and we have a couple of alignment options. I'm gonna choose center align because I'm gonna center it inside this flower shape here. And I'm gonna use a slightly smaller font, and I'll figure out how big it should be later. So I'm gonna place my cursor right there in the center, and I will make up something like sparkle, glitter. Actually, this might look better if it's all lowercase. Sparkle, glitter, signs. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is go over to my move tool, which is these little 4 arrows here. And I'm gonna hit Command T. That gives me the availability to resize. And I can resize it like so, and then hit Enter, Return. So we've added text. Honestly, I'm not thrilled with it, but it's bothering me. I'm like, I don't like what I did there. I think it should have been, I think it could be a better font choice, but we'll leave it there for now. I'll change the font later. We're gonna go to emphasis, dominance and emphasis. I feel like I've already created dominance and emphasis by using the contrast and the alignment, right? Like the emphasis is definitely on this flower because we have like these lines drawing our attention to it. It's light against a dark background. So I don't think there's anything more I can do with dominance and emphasis. Asymmetry. Asymmetry is fun. So right now we have what's called a symmetrical design, which means that the balance is placed right in the center, which is cool, but also slightly boring. What I can do is select all these elements by holding down the Shift button, selecting them all, and I can use something called the rule of thirds. Now, anyone who's had any sort of artistic training probably is familiar with the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds asks you to imagine that your document is divided up into 3 vertical sections and 3 horizontal sections. And you don't actually have to draw these lines, you can just visually imagine it. And if you place the focal point on one of these intersecting points, it will create a design that is interesting and asymmetrical. So there we've created asymmetrical balance by using the rule of thirds to move our focal point over to one of the intersecting points on our rule of thirds grid that I just created. And by the way, you can create a grid if you want to align things just by clicking on this ruler here and clicking and dragging and pulling out guidelines. And then you saw how I made my grid show up and then go bye-bye because I didn't want to look at it anymore. If you hold down the command semicolon button, that makes your grid come up and go away. And if you're on a PC, that's going to be control semicolon. Oh. Where am I going? Where was my window? Okay, what's the other? Oh, there it goes. There we go. Harmony. I feel like there is harmony because we all have, you know, the focal point. Actually, what I could do maybe to make a little bit more harmony is my background is crazy, crazy. And I think maybe if I were to lower the opacity a little bit, just make it not quite so crazy. And what else can I do? Color, space. We could always change the color to go with something different. And something that I will do is I'll do a little color pop idea. I think that'll be good. So what I'm going to do is go to my topmost layer, go down here to the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other, and then click on the hue saturation. Hue saturation is a really fun adjustment layer to play with because it allows you to change the whole color scheme of your document. So that's what we'll do. We'll change the whole color scheme of our document. So what I'm going to do is just move this hue slider. Right? Choose a different color. We can also desaturate it by making it a little bit more gray. And now remember when I said that thing about color pop? I can go to my brush tool and paint on this white shape that has appeared next to my hue saturation layer. That's called, this white thing that has appeared in my layers next to the hue saturation layer is called the layer mask. And every time you paint with black on it, it cuts a hole in your layer and allows you to see underneath it. So we've made this whole layer kind of this bluish desaturated color. Well, I'm gonna paint black on it and see now you can see that reddish color that's underneath. Okay, so that's a good way to play with color. Let me see if there's anything else. We have to post a PDF and keep the raw. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and we are going to save our raw Photoshop document. And I'll just call this journal, so it's separate from our previous one. Journal. And that's our raw Photoshop document. And now I'm going to save the PDF. Now, to save a PDF, in order for it to show up in the gradebook and not cause any trouble, I would recommend holding down the Shift button and hitting Shift Command Option E. Shift Command Option E will merge all of your layers together. And then go up to Layer, Rasterize All Layers. Layer, Rasterize All Layers. Next, I'll go to File, Save As, and in Format, I'm going to select Photoshop PDF. Photoshop PDF. Uncheck layers, uncheck layers. We want this to be a nice small file size that can easily be uploaded to the gradebook. Now where it says Adobe PDF presets, I'm going to select smallest file size. And then I'm going to hit Save PDF. Okay, and that PDF is then all ready to be submitted to the classroom. I'll talk briefly about the design brief that's due. But first, are there any questions? Does anyone want me to repeat anything over again? Is anyone confused about anything? Nope, you guys are good? Okay. I am going to talk about the design brief. So a design brief is not an essay, okay? A design brief should be a simple brief. It should not use complete sentences. It should not be in paragraph format. If anything, it should be in bullet point format, okay? And I've provided some examples in the announcements of past design briefs that have been submitted by students. So I really want to encourage you to take a look at those. But, you know, you're not, what's really important is you're not writing an essay. Yes, you're welcome to make your design brief in Microsoft Word. You're welcome to make your design brief in Photoshop if you want and make it pretty. But it should be, bullet points that list out, target demographic, men ages 18 to 35, design elements. The color scheme is going to be in neutrals, black, gray, light gray, metallics. Style, voice, it's going to create something whimsical but also masculine, something like that, using really, really short, concise phrases like that. So if you do go on Pinterest, you will see you can search for some design briefs and see some examples. So there's some nice templates on here. I want to see a finished one though. I know there are some finished design briefs on here. Here's an example. See, this does have some, longer paragraph formats, but what I'm kind of looking for, honestly, in this week's assignment is something like this. Heading, a little bit, a few not complete sentences, a few words, keywords, some bullet points, and that's it. You can also go on YouTube and do a search for design brief, and you'll find lots of videos from graphic designers talking about their approaches to doing a design brief. But please don't overthink it. A design brief is just a document kind of explaining what you intend to do with a project. And I like to use, active verbs and adjectives. So, words like whimsical, words like, severe, dominant, impactful, lighthearted, contemporary, vintage, rugged, grungy, those words that kind of describe feelings are great to use on a design brief. And how you intend to reach the audience, use active verbs such as like excite, inspire, amuse, excite, inspire, amuse, empower. That was the word I was thinking. Excite, inspire, amuse, empower. Those are good words that you can use for explaining how you want an audience to feel about your project. There's always underwear ads on Pinterest. Why? And baby ads. And I'm like, anyway. Look, there's a little tutorial on design brief there. Oh, I guess because I was searching for brief. They think I'm searching for underwear. Now I understand. Oh my goodness. They think I'm looking for well-designed briefs. Cool. Okay, so let's kind of end things here, but I also want to leave things open to if you guys have any questions. Any questions? Any requests? Alrighty, and this will be posted in the classroom, so you guys can refer to it as much as you want. And feel free to email me if you have any follow-up questions. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so I'm gonna stop recording.